The crimson warning lights painted the command center in blood-red shadows as Captain Marcus Kane pressed his weathered hands against the console. The numbers falling on his screen told a story of certain death. Shield power at 22%, 19%, 15%. Each percentage point lost brought 50,000 innocent souls closer to extinction. "Captain, they're launching another wave," Lieutenant Zara Voss called from her station, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. 60 Krellian battleships descending from high orbit. Our scanners show each one carrying 1,000 soldiers. Marcus studied the tactical display with growing dread. Red markers filled the holographic space above his console like drops of poison. The Krellian Empire had brought enough firepower to glass an entire world, and they were using it all against one small mining colony that had dared to resist their demands. "How long until complete shield failure?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer would be worse than he hoped. Chief Engineer Tobias Reed wiped sweat from his blue-scaled forehead. The old Altarian had served alongside humans for 30 years, and his loyalty had never wavered. 4 hours, maybe 5, if we shut down life support to the outer residential sectors. "That's where most of the families are hiding," Marcus said quietly. "We can't abandon them." Outside the reinforced windows of the command center, Zephyr Colony stretched across the valley like a broken jewel. What had once been a thriving community of miners, farmers, and traders now burned under the relentless Krellian assault. Smoke rose from collapsed buildings, and the bodies of defenders lay scattered in the streets they had died protecting. The Krellians had arrived 3 weeks ago with a simple demand: surrender the colony's quantum crystal deposits or face total annihilation. These crystals powered the fastest ships in known space, making them more valuable than gold. Marcus had tried to negotiate, explaining that Zephyr Colony was protected under Galactic Federation law, that they were peaceful civilians who had never harmed anyone. The Krellians had responded by destroying the colony's defense fleet in a single devastating attack. 12 ships and 400 brave souls had died in minutes, their wreckage now floating in orbit as a warning to any who might think of resistance. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the Krellian flagship," Communications Officer David Park announced, his young face pale with exhaustion. "Supreme Commander Vextar wants to speak with you." Marcus straightened his shoulders. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature that looked like it had crawled out of humanity's darkest nightmares. "Supreme Commander?" Vextar stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in chitinous armor that seemed to be part skin, part technology. 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws gestured as he spoke, and his compound eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence. "Captain Kane," Vextar's voice was like grinding metal, "you have cost me valuable time and soldiers. My patience grows thin." "These people are under my protection," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his chest. "They're miners and farmers, not soldiers. They've done nothing to deserve this." Vextar's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "They possess what the Empire requires. That is crime enough. Surrender now, and I will allow half of your colonists to live as workers in our crystal mines. Continue this foolish resistance, and everyone dies." "I've given you my answer before," Marcus said. "It hasn't changed." "Very well." Vextar's image leaned forward, his alien features twisting with rage. "In 1 hour, I will begin orbital bombardment of your residential sectors. Every minute you delay surrender will cost 1,000 lives. Their blood will be on your hands, human." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in heavy silence. Marcus looked around at his remaining officers, seeing his own desperation reflected in their faces. They had fought bravely, using mining equipment as weapons and cargo containers, as shields, but they were civilians pretending to be soldiers against a professional military force. "Continue sending the distress signal," Marcus ordered. "Someone out there has to hear us." Deep in space, far from the dying colony, a human patrol ship detected the faint signal. The USS Prometheus, under the command of Captain Rachel Stone, had been conducting routine patrols near the edge of human space when the desperate plea for help reached their senses. "Captain," called Lieutenant Commander James Wright from the communications station, "we're picking up a distress signal from the Zephyr system. It's bad, ma'am." Captain Stone was a veteran of the Centauri conflicts, a woman whose reputation for never leaving anyone behind had earned her the loyalty of every soul on her ship. "What are we looking at, Wright?" "Krellian Empire forces, ma'am." "A full invasion." "Fleet, they're attacking a civilian colony." Wright's voice cracked slightly. 50,000 people, including children." Stone stood from her command chair, her jaw set in determination. "How long to reach them?" "At maximum burn, 36 hours. Then we'd better get moving. All hands, prepare for combat operations." The Prometheus changed course towards Zephyr Colony. Its crew had no idea they were about to write the first chapter in humanity's rise to galactic power. The war that would reshape the galaxy was about to begin with the desperate defense of one small world, and the courage of those who refused to let innocence die in the darkness. The USS Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system like an avenging angel, its dark hull scarred from a dozen battles across the galaxy. Captain Rachel Stone stood on the bridge, her green eyes taking in the tactical display with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up its prey. "Sensor report," she commanded, her voice cutting through the bridge's tense atmosphere. 47 Krellian vessels in orbit around Zephyr Prime," reported Lieutenant Commander James Wright. "Heavy cruisers, battle carriers, and troop transports. They're conducting orbital bombardment of the colony's surface." Stone's hands clenched into fists. Through the main view screen, she could see the flashes of weapons fire as the Krellian fleet systematically destroyed everything the colonists had built. "What about the colony's shields?" "Failing, ma'am. I estimate less than 2 hours before. Complete collapse." Navigator Chenway looked up from her station, her face grim. "Captain, we're outnumbered 47-1. Even with our advanced weaponry, the odds are—" "I know the odds, Chen," Stone interrupted. "But there are 50,000 people down there who are counting on us. We didn't come this far to turn back now." She activated the ship's intercom system. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to engage a superior enemy force to protect innocent civilians. I won't lie to you, this is going to be the fight of our lives. But we are the Prometheus, and we do not abandon those who need us. Battle stations." Throughout the ship, alarms began to wail as the crew prepared for combat. In the fighter bays, pilots climbed into their cockpits, while ground crews made final weapon checks. In engineering, Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos pushed the fusion reactors to their maximum safe output, knowing they would need every bit of power available. "Tactical analysis complete," announced Weapons Officer David Kim. "The Krellian formation is focused on planetary bombardment. They're not expecting an attack from outside the system." Stone nodded. "That gives us one advantage. They'll need time to reorganize their formation to face us." On the planet below, Captain Marcus Kane watched the space battle begin through his colony's failing sensors. A new contact had appeared on the edge of the system, a single ship moving at incredible speed toward the Krellian fleet. "Sir," Lieutenant Zara Voss said in amazement, "that's a human ship, Prometheus-class heavy cruiser." "One ship against 47. Chief Engineer Tobias Reed shook his head. "They're brave, but it's suicide." Marcus felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "Maybe, but humans have a way of surprising people." The first Krellian ships to detect the Prometheus turned to engage, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Supreme Commander Vextar's voice echoed across the communication channels as he roared orders to his fleet. "Destroy that human ship. Do not let them interfere with our conquest." But Captain Stone had no intention of fighting a traditional battle. The Prometheus dove toward the Krellian fleet like a striking falcon, using its superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. Stone's tactics were unconventional, even reckless, but they were effective. "Target their command ship," Stone ordered. "All missile tubes, fire!" The Prometheus unleashed a devastating barrage of quantum torpedoes, each one guided by advanced targeting computers that could adjust their course mid-flight. The Krellian flagship's shields flared as the weapons struck home, but the ship held together. "Their armor is thicker than our intelligence reports suggested," Wright called out. "It's going to take more than one salvo to bring down their capital." "Ships? Then we'll give them more than one salvo," Stone replied grimly. "Launch fighters. I want Squadron Leader Patricia Hayes and her pilots to target their troop transports. If we can't save the colony by destroying their fleet, we'll save it by preventing reinforcements from reaching the surface." The Prometheus's fighter bays opened, releasing a swarm of sleek interceptors into the void. Squadron Leader Hayes, a pilot whose reputation for aggressive tactics had earned her the nickname Lightning, led her squadron directly into the heart of the Krellian formation. "All fighters, this is Lightning." Hayes' voice crackled over the comm. "Target priority is troop transports. Make every shot count." The human fighters danced between the massive Krellian warships, their smaller size and superior engines allowing them to avoid most of the enemy fire. Hayes herself took down 2 troop transports in quick succession, her missiles finding weak points in their armor that the Krellians had never bothered to reinforce. Back on the Prometheus, Stone watched the battle unfold with growing satisfaction. The Krellians were powerful, but they were also predictable. Their formations were rigid, their tactics by the book. Humans, on the other hand, had learned to improvise, to adapt, to find victory in situations where none should exist. "Captain," Wright called out, "the Krellian fleet is beginning to reorganize. They're forming a battle line to face us directly." "Good," Stone replied. "Let them come. Helm, take us straight at their flagship. Full speed!" The bridge crew looked at their captain in shock. "Ma'am," Navigator Chen protested, "that's a suicide run. Their combined firepower will tear us apart." Stone's eyes never left the view screen as the Prometheus accelerated toward the enemy formation. "Trust me, Chen. I have a plan." What happened next would be remembered as one of the most audacious tactical maneuvers in military history. The Prometheus, seemingly flying straight into the guns of the Krellian fleet, suddenly rolled and dove beneath their firing arc. The ship's experimental gravitic drive allowed it to change direction in ways that defied conventional physics, pulling maneuvers that would have crushed the crew of any other vessel. As the Prometheus passed beneath the Krellian flagship, it fired every weapon it had directly into the enemy ship's unarmored belly. The quantum torpedoes, plasma cannons, and particle beams tore through the Krellian vessel's hull like paper, causing massive explosions that lit up the darkness of space. Supreme Commander Vextar's flagship, the pride of the Krellian Empire, broke apart in a cascade of fire and debris. His death scream echoed across the communication channels as his ship became an expanding ball of plasma and twisted metal. The remaining Krellian ships, suddenly leaderless and facing an enemy that fought unlike anything they had ever encountered, began to break formation. Some tried to flee, others continued the attack, but their coordination was shattered. On Zephyr Colony, the defenders watched in amazement as the space battle turned in their favor. Captain Marcus Kane felt tears streaming down his face as he realized that help had finally arrived, and that humanity's reputation for never giving up was well deserved. The birth of the Terran Empire had begun with a single ship and a captain who refused to let innocents die in the darkness. The tactical situation around Zephyr Colony had become a chaotic dance of death and survival. The USS Prometheus, though victorious in its initial strike, now faced the full wrath of the remaining Krellian fleet. 36 enemy ships converged on the lone human cruiser, their weapons blazing with fury over the destruction of their flagship. Captain Rachel Stone gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. "Damage report. Forward shields at 60%, called out Chief Engineer Maria Santos over the intercom. Hull breach on Deck 7, but we've got it contained. The gravitic drive is running hot, but she'll hold together." Stone watched the tactical display as red markers closed in from all sides. The Prometheus was fast and maneuverable, but even the best ship in the human fleet couldn't fight 40 enemies at once. She needed a miracle, and she needed it now. "Captain, Lieutenant," Commander Wright suddenly shouted from his station. "New contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Multiple signatures bearing 27 Mark 5. The view screen shifted to show a sight that made Stone's heart leap with hope. Emerging from the swirling vortex of hyperspace came the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The entire third fleet of the Terran Navy, led by the massive dreadnought Excalibur. "This is Admiral Thomas Harrison aboard the TDS Excalibur," came a familiar voice over the communication channel. "Sorry we're late to the party, Rachel. We came as soon as we got your message." Stone couldn't help but smile, despite the desperate situation. Admiral Harrison had been her mentor during the Centauri conflicts, and his arrival meant the tide of battle was about to turn dramatically. "Thomas, you beautiful bastard," she replied. "I've got 36 very angry Krellians who need to be taught some manners. Consider it done. All ships, battle formation Omega. Show these insects what happens when they threaten human civilians." The Third Fleet spread out across the system like an avalanche of steel and fury. 12 heavy cruisers, 8 battleships, 4 carriers, and the massive dreadnought Excalibur formed a wall of human military might that made even the Krellians pause in their assault. On the planet below, Captain Marcus Kane and his defenders watched in awe as the human fleet engaged the enemy. "How many ships is that?" asked Lieutenant Zara Voss, her voice filled with wonder. 25 capital ships," replied Chief Engineer Tobias Reed, his alien eyes wide with amazement. "I've never seen such a concentration of firepower in one place." The space battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations to come. The Krellians, despite their numerical advantage at the start of the engagement, found themselves facing an enemy that fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical brilliance that they had never encountered before. Admiral Harrison's strategy was simple but devastating. Rather than engaging in a traditional line battle, he divided his fleet into 3 task forces that attacked the Krellian formation from different angles simultaneously. The human ships used their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the enemy fire while concentrating their own weapons on specific targets. "Target their heavy cruisers first," Harrison ordered. "Take out their main firepower, then mop up the smaller ships." The TDS Excalibur, a kilometer-long monster of a ship armed with the most advanced weapons in the human arsenal, led the center. Attack! Its main guns, massive particle beam cannons that could punch through a moon, reached out across space to touch the Krellian ships with devastating effect. Squadron leader Patricia Hayes, still leading her fighters from the Prometheus, found herself joined by hundreds of additional pilots from the fleet carriers. "All fighter wings, this is Fleet Command," came the voice of the Admiral's tactical coordinator. "Coordinate with Lightning Squadron. Target enemy troop transports and support vessels." The combined human fighter force swept through the Krellian formation like a plague of metallic locusts, their advanced missiles and energy weapons finding weak points in enemy armor that had never been tested against human technology. The Krellians, accustomed to fighting less advanced species, found themselves outmatched by opponents who treated space combat as an art form. But the true turning point came when the Krellians attempted to use their most feared weapon, the Planet Killer. Missile, A massive weapon designed to crack worlds apart, it was launched from one of their remaining battleships directly at Zephyr Colony. "Missile launch detected," reported the Excalibur's sensor officer. "Planet killer warhead, impact in 4 minutes." Admiral Harrison's face went white. Even if they won the space battle, the colony would be destroyed. 50,000 innocent people would die, and the Krellians would achieve their goal of denying the quantum crystals to humanity. "All ships, emergency intercept course. We need to stop that missile." But it was Captain Stone on the Prometheus who provided the solution. "Admiral, I can catch it. My ship is the fastest in the fleet." "Rachel, no. That thing is designed to destroy planets. If you get too close when you destroy it—" "I know the risks, Thomas, but I didn't come this far to let those people die now." The Prometheus broke away from the main battle. Its engines pushed far beyond their safety limits as it raced to intercept the planet-killer missile. The ship's advanced targeting systems locked onto the massive weapon, but the missile was designed to withstand defensive fire. It would take a direct hit from close range to destroy it. "All hands, brace for impact," Stone announced over the intercom. "We're going to ram that missile and detonate it manually." The crew of the Prometheus, knowing they were about to sacrifice their lives to save the colony, worked with calm professionalism. Chief Engineer Santos pushed the engines to their absolute maximum. Navigator Chen calculated the perfect intercept course, and Weapons Officer Kim prepared the ship's entire missile complement for simultaneous detonation. But as the Prometheus closed in on the planet killer, a miracle occurred. The missile's guidance system, confused by the advanced electronic warfare systems that all human ships carried, began to malfunction. Instead of maintaining its course toward the planet, it started to drift off target. The missile's losing guidance. "Lock," Wright reported. "Our ECM is working." Stone didn't hesitate. "All weapons, fire, destroy it now." The Prometheus unleashed every weapon it had at the malfunctioning missile. Quantum torpedoes, plasma cannons, and particle beams struck the massive warhead simultaneously, causing it to detonate in a flash of light visible from the planet's surface. The explosion was so powerful that it temporarily blinded sensors across the entire system. But when the energy dissipated, the Prometheus was still there, battered but intact. "This is Stone to all ships." The captain's voice crackled over the communication channels. "Planet killer destroyed. Colony is safe." The cheer that went up across the human fleet could be heard even over the background of battle. With their ultimate weapon destroyed, and their fleet being systematically dismantled by superior human tactics and technology, the remaining Krellians began to surrender or flee. Admiral Harrison's voice filled the communication channels. "This is Admiral Harrison to all Krellian vessels. You are defeated. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Continue fighting, and you will be destroyed." One by one, the surviving Krellian ships powered down their weapons and transmitted surrender codes. The Battle of Zephyr Colony was over, and humanity had won its first major victory against a galactic empire. On the planet below, Captain Marcus Kane stood in his damaged command center, watching the human fleet establish orbital control. The colonists were safe, their world was saved, and the galaxy had just learned that humanity was not to be underestimated. The command deck of the Krellian heavy cruiser Devastator was a scene of barely controlled chaos. Secondary Commander Krelax stood before the tactical display, his forearms trembling with rage and disbelief as he watched his empire's fleet being systematically destroyed by what should have been an inferior force. "Commander," his communications officer reported, his voice shaking with fear, "the humans are hailing us again. They demand our surrender." Krelax's compound eyes flashed with hatred. The Krellian Empire had conquered 17 star systems, enslaved billions of sentient beings, and struck fear into the hearts of entire civilizations. They did not surrender to anyone, especially not to a young species that had barely left their home world. Tell them, Krelak snarled, his mandibles clicking with fury, that the Krellian Empire does not yield to inferior races. We will fight, to the last ship, to the last warrior. But even as he spoke those words, Krelax knew they were hollow. Of the 47 ships that had begun the assault on Zephyr Colony, only 12 remained functional. The rest were either destroyed or so badly damaged they could barely maintain orbit. The humans had demonstrated a level of tactical sophistication and technological superiority that no Krellian military analyst had predicted. On the bridge of the TDS Excalibur, Admiral Thomas Harrison received the Krellian response with grim satisfaction. He had hoped they would surrender and spare unnecessary bloodshed, but he had fought the Krellians before during the border skirmishes near Proxima Centauri. They were a proud, aggressive species who respected only strength. "Signal all ships," Harrison commanded. "Prepare for final assault. Target their remaining vessels simultaneously. No survivors unless they surrender." The human fleet, now reinforced by additional ships that had arrived during the battle, formed a perfect tactical formation around the remaining Krellian vessels. 28 human warships faced 12 badly damaged enemy cruisers. The outcome was not in doubt. "Admiral," came Captain Stone's voice from the Prometheus, requesting permission to lead the final assault. "My ship has a personal score to settle with these bastards." Harrison smiled grimly. Rachel Stone had always been aggressive, but her tactics were sound. "Permission granted, Captain. Show them what the Prometheus can do." The final phase of the battle lasted exactly 11 minutes. The human ships attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously, their advanced targeting systems allowing them to coordinate their fire with devastating precision. The Krellian vessels, already weakened by the previous fighting, simply could not withstand the concentrated firepower of the entire human fleet. One by one, the Krellian ships died. The heavy cruiser Annihilator exploded when a quantum torpedo penetrated its reactor shielding. The battleship Conqueror broke apart under the combined fire of 3 human destroyers. The carrier Dominator watched helplessly as its fighter bays were systematically destroyed by precision strikes from the Excalibur's main guns. Aboard the Devastator, Secondary Commander Krelax watched his fleet die around him. The tactical display showed nothing but red symbols marking destroyed vessels. His own ship was barely holding together, its shields down to 15% and multiple hull breaches venting atmosphere into space. "Commander," his weapons officer reported, "we have lost main power to the forward weapons array. Secondary batteries are offline. We cannot return fire." Krelax stared at the view screen, watching the human ships close in for the kill. In the distance, he could see Zephyr Colony, still intact despite everything his empire had thrown at it. The humans had not only defeated his fleet, but had protected the very people the Krellians had come to conquer. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "perhaps we should consider—" "No," Krelax cut him off. "We are Krellians. We do not surrender." But fate had other plans. The ship's chief engineer, a pragmatic individual named Vorth Ak, had been monitoring the battle from the engine room. He had seen enough of his comrades die for the pride of commanders who valued honor over the lives of their crews. Without authorization, Vorthak activated the ship's emergency surrender beacon. The Devastator's weapons powered down, its shields collapsed, and a transmission began broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is the Krellian vessel Devastator. We surrender! We surrender! Please do not fire!" Krelax spun around in fury, his claws extended. "Who authorized that transmission?" "I did," Vorthak said, appearing on the bridge with several other engineers. "This battle is over, Commander. Our empire sent us to die for nothing. I will not watch more good soldiers die for the pride of fools." The argument that followed was brief but decisive. The surviving crew members, faced with the choice between certain death and possible survival, chose to support their engineer. Krelax, outnumbered and outranked by circumstances, was forced to accept the surrender. Admiral Harrison received the surrender transmission with mixed feelings. Part of him wanted to complete the destruction of the Krelian fleet, to send a message that attacking human civilians would not be tolerated. But another part of him, the part that had been shaped by decades of military service, recognized that the enemy had been defeated and that mercy was sometimes the mark of true strength. "This is Admiral Harrison to the Krelian vessel Devastator," he transmitted. "Your surrender is accepted. Power down all weapons systems and prepare to be boarded. Any attempt to resist will result in your immediate destruction." The process of accepting the Krelian surrender took several hours. Human Marines, led by Colonel James Mitchell, boarded each surviving enemy vessel and secured their crews. The Krelians, though defeated, were treated according to the laws of war. Their wounded were given medical attention, their dead were treated with respect, and their survivors were processed as prisoners of war rather than executed as pirates or slavers. Captain Marcus Kane, finally able to leave his command center now that the battle was over, watched the human fleet operations with growing amazement. The efficiency and professionalism of the human military was unlike anything he had ever seen. They had not only defeated a superior enemy force, but had done so while maintaining the highest standards of military conduct. Captain Kane came. Admiral Harrison's voice over the communication channel. "This is Admiral Harrison. I'd like to speak with you personally." Kane made his way to the colony's main communication array, where a holographic projection of the human admiral appeared. Harrison was a man in his 50s, with graying hair and the steady gaze of someone who had seen too much war, but had never lost his humanity. "Captain," Harrison said, "I want you to know that your defense of this colony was remarkable. You held out against impossible odds and saved the lives of 50,000 people. The Terran Federation will not forget what you did here." Kane felt emotion welling up in his chest. "Admiral, if you and your fleet hadn't arrived when you did, we would all be dead. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank us." "Captain, what happened here today was bigger than just one colony. The Krelians thought they could bully humanity and our allies with impunity. They were wrong. Word of this victory will spread throughout the galaxy, and every species will know that humans do not abandon their friends." As the human fleet began, the process of securing the system and establishing a permanent presence to prevent future attacks, the survivors of Zephyr Colony began to rebuild their lives. But the impact of the Battle of Zephyr Colony would extend far beyond one small world. News of the human victory spread through the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees who had witnessed the battle's aftermath. Species that had been oppressed by the Krelian Empire for generations began to hope for the first time in decades. The humans, it seemed, were not just another aggressive young race seeking to expand their territory. They were liberators, protectors of the innocent, and champions of justice. The Krelian Empire, meanwhile, reeled from the shock of their defeat. The loss of an entire invasion fleet to a single human cruiser and its reinforcements was more than a military disaster. It was a psychological blow that would reshape their entire approach to expansion and conquest. The age of human dominance in the galaxy was about to begin. 6 months after the Battle of Zephyr Colony, the galaxy was a very different place. The news of humanity's decisive victory over the Krelian Empire had spread like wildfire through every trade route, diplomatic channel, and refugee camp in known space. The species that had lived in fear of Krelian expansion for generations suddenly saw hope for the first time in decades. On the human capital world of New Geneva, President Elizabeth Harper stood before the Terran Council in the Great Assembly Hall, her voice carrying across the chamber to representatives from dozens of worlds. The decision she was about to announce would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy forever. "Honored delegates," she began, her words being translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. 6 months ago, the Krellian Empire attacked innocent civilians on Zephyr Colony, believing that humanity would not risk war to protect our friends and allies. They were wrong. The assembly hall erupted in applause. Representatives from species across the galaxy rose to their feet, their various forms of approval creating a cacophony of sounds that somehow harmonized into a symphony of hope and gratitude. Captain Rachel Stone, now promoted to Admiral for her actions at Zephyr Colony, sat in the front row of the military section. Beside her sat Captain Marcus Kane, who had been invited to Earth as a representative of the outer colonies. The former mining supervisor still couldn't quite believe he was sitting in the halls of human power, but his heroic defense of Zephyr Colony had made him a symbol of resistance against tyranny. The Krellian attack, President Harper continued, was not just an assault on one colony. It was an attack on the principles that define us as a species, the protection of the innocent, the defense of freedom, and the belief that no being should live in fear of oppression. In the diplomatic section, Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Republic leaned forward in his seat. His people had been among the first to ally with humanity, and he had watched with growing pride as his human friends had grown from a curious new species to a major galactic power. "Today," Harper announced, "I'm asking this council to approve the formation of the Terran Protective Alliance. This will not be an empire built on conquest or exploitation. It will be a voluntary union of free species, dedicated to protecting each other from those who would enslave or destroy us." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the first official documents of the Terran Protective Alliance were signed by representatives from 47 different species: the Altarians, the Centauri Federation, the Kepler Mining Guild, and dozens of smaller groups pledged their support to the new alliance. But the true test of the alliance came sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence reports began arriving from the Galactic Rim, where the Krellian Empire was rebuilding its military forces with help from an even more dangerous ally, the Zephyrian hegemony, a collection of machine intelligences that viewed all organic life as a plague to be eradicated. Admiral Stone found herself in command of the largest military force in Terran history. The Third Fleet had been expanded to include ships from every member species of the Alliance. Human technology was being shared freely with their allies, while alien innovations were being incorporated into human designs. The result was a military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The second major test of the Alliance came when the Zephyrian hegemony launched a massive assault on the Vega system, home to 12 billion Centauri civilians. The mechanical intelligences had decided that the Terran Protective Alliance posed a threat to their plans of galactic sterilization, and they intended to strike first. The Battle of Vega lasted 3 days and became the largest space engagement in recorded history. Over 2,000 ships from both sides participated in a conflict that would determine the fate of organic life in the galaxy. Admiral Stone commanded the Allied fleet from the bridge of the new flagship TDS Liberator, a massive vessel that combined the best of human engineering with innovations from across the Alliance. The Zephyrian forces were unlike anything the humans had faced before. Their ships were perfectly coordinated, their tactics mathematically precise, and their weapons designed specifically to kill organic life forms. But they had one crucial weakness: they could not adapt to the creative, illogical thinking that characterized organic species. All ships, Stone broadcast to the Allied fleet, implement Chaos Protocol 7, randomize attack patterns, and ignore conventional tactical doctrine. Make them think like we do, and they'll make mistakes. The strategy: worked. The Zephyrian machines, programmed to respond to logical tactical maneuvers, found themselves unable to predict or counter the seemingly random attacks of the organic fleet. Human ships would suddenly reverse course and attack from unexpected angles. Altarian vessels would shut down their engines and drift like debris before suddenly springing to life and striking at close range. Centauri fighters would perform maneuvers that should have been impossible, their organic pilots pushing their machines beyond their design specifications through sheer force of will. The victory at Vega marked the beginning of the end for the Zephyrian hegemony. Over the following months, the Terran Protective Alliance launched a series of liberation campaigns that freed dozens of worlds from machine control. Each victory brought new species into the Alliance until it encompassed most of the galaxy's inhabited systems. The Krellian Empire, meanwhile, found itself increasingly isolated. Their attempt to ally with the machines had backfired spectacularly, as the Zephyrians had decided that the Krellians were just another organic species to be eliminated. Facing destruction from their former allies and unable to match the growing power of the Terran Alliance, the Krellian government finally sued for peace. The peace negotiations took place on the neutral world of Harmony Station, a massive space habitat that had been built specifically for diplomatic conferences. Admiral Stone, now the supreme commander of the Alliance military, sat across from the Krellian delegation, led by their new leader, diplomat Prime Kethara. "We offer unconditional surrender," Kethara announced, her words translated into the common diplomatic language. The Krellian Empire acknowledges the sovereignty of the Terran Protective Alliance and requests permission to join as a member species. The chamber fell silent. Many of the Alliance representatives had lost friends and family to Krellian aggression over the decades. The idea of accepting their former enemies as equals was difficult to accept. Admiral Stone leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of her experience. The Terran Protective Alliance was founded on the principle that all beings deserve freedom from oppression. That includes former oppressors who genuinely seek redemption. The integration of the Krellian Empire into the Alliance was not easy. Many Krellians struggled with the concept of equality among species, having been raised in a culture that valued conquest above cooperation. But under the patient guidance of human diplomats and the example of other alliance members, they slowly began to adapt. Captain Marcus Kane, now serving as the Alliance's colonial defense coordinator, often found himself working alongside former Krellian military officers. The irony was not lost on him that the same species that had tried to destroy his colony was now helping to protect other worlds from similar threats. "You know," Kane said to his Krellian counterpart, Commander Zethek, as they reviewed defense plans for the Outer Rim territories, "a year ago I would have shot you on sight." Zethek's mandibles clicked in what Kane had learned was the Krellian equivalent of rueful laughter. "And I would have considered you nothing more than prey to be hunted. It is strange how war can change perspectives." The final threat to galactic peace came from an unexpected source: humanity itself. A faction of human extremists, calling themselves the Terra First Movement, had begun advocating for human supremacy within the Alliance. They argued that since humans had been the primary force in defeating the galaxy's threats, humans should rule over the other species rather than cooperating with them as equals. The movement's leader, General Marcus Webb, had been a hero during the Zephyrian War, but his experiences had left him bitter and convinced that only human leadership could maintain galactic order. When he attempted a military coup against the Alliance government, it fell to Admiral Stone to stop him. The confrontation took place in orbit around Earth itself, as Webb's faction seized control of several military installations and declared themselves the legitimate government of humanity. Stone found herself in the position of fighting against her own species to preserve the principles that the Alliance had been founded upon. This is Admiral Stone to all ships loyal to the Terran Protective Alliance, she broadcast from the bridge. Of the Liberator, we stand at a crossroads. We can choose to become the very thing we fought against, conquerors and oppressors, or we can remain true to the values that made us worthy of leading this alliance in the first place.